The idea here is that when you form a company, if you want the company to be an impactful company, and by impactful I mean have an impact on many people, which means you need to create jobs, you need to create a company that will add value not only to the economy in terms of products and services, but the economy in terms of jobs and people. You need to design the entire company, not just the product. Often people think that all design is done on products. And it's true that you need typically to do some product design, but there's also the business model, there's the organization, the culture, there's the management systems, and there are the management competencies and capabilities that need to be designed. Now, why do I say designed? Because, in fact, when you start a company, you don't have any of these. And oftentimes people focus just on the product. It turns out that if you look at innovations in products, in companies, roughly half of them come in the business model, not in the product or service. And there are many examples of this where people have the same product, and the reason they are successful or not successful has to do with the business model and other aspects of the way they have built a company. I use the term design because, in fact, it is designing because you don't have anything to start with. And it's important because, for our students at least, to think about the fact that they're not just managing things that exist, they're actually having to design things that then will be able to be managed. And so there's a challenge, there's an intellectual challenge and an exciting challenge and opportunities for innovation in all of these aspects of a business model. So to start with, you need to have a vision of what you want to do. And you need to have an idea of an opportunity that would allow you to create some value. And so you start with a hypothesis. I think this is a product that will be valuable. And I think that if we have this product, it will take us here. And then you start testing. And this is all about design thinking, both for products and services, but also design thinking for the company itself. So you try things out and you test them out. And then you go to people who can give you feedback. So if you're trying to create a business model that will allow you to interact with a customer, you not only go to the customer with the product, you go to the customer with a business model. So here is a product for you. And by the way, how would you like to be able to pay for this over time? Would you like a subscription? Would you like to have a membership program that would allow you to have this as a part of the membership program? So all these things are things you test, and you test them on the people that you need to have either buy or interact with them. If you go back early on to companies like Hewlett-Packard, for instance, they had both an innovative product and an innovative organizational design and culture. Often people talk about the HP way. The HP way didn't invent itself. Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard invented the HP way, and it was an example of a culture that allowed their firm to operate in a competitive way that was superior to other competitors. Now you might say, did they do that because we had told them they should do it, we being somebody? No, it's something that they learned. But what happens when you study about entrepreneurship, you study entrepreneurs, you learn from them, and you learn this is something you need to do. And Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett were examples of that early on in the instance of creating not only a product, but a culture that allowed them to continue to deliver that product and other products. It's important to continue to innovate. And when you think about continuing to innovate, you think about new product introduction, but you also can innovate in the business model. And as you go from a small startup to a medium-sized company, to a very large company, to a high-growth company, you have to continue to innovate and change the business model and change the organization. And maybe you change even the culture, but certainly you change the way in which you interact with your suppliers, which is a very big part of any business model. How do you interact with your suppliers? One of the things that is so good about Silicon Valley and being able to start a company in Silicon Valley is the ecostructure, the infrastructure, if you like, or ecosystem is very well developed. And what that means is you don't have to do everything yourself. And to the extent that you can have an extensive and competitive infrastructure, then it allows you to be more creative in other parts of the business. And what you have to do is understand how to utilize them in different ways as you grow. So for instance, Sun Microsystems early on had 15 engineers. Hewlett-Packard had 300. They were both competing in the same market. And the question for Scott McNealy and Vinod Khosla, how do we get all the products we need from 15 engineers? And what they did was they got it from the supply network. Because the suppliers were extensive, they could buy the products they needed, and secondly, they were competitive. Because the suppliers only focused on disk drives or only focused on monitors. They didn't focus on the entire set of the computer product. And so they were able to get better technology. And the question was, how were they able to convince the suppliers to build the products that they needed? So that's a thing you change over time. As you grow, you may do more inside and more outside. And it's a continuing process that's important as you go through the journey, so to speak. If you ask people who have been with HP over a long period of time, they would say that the HP way has changed. If you ask people like John Young, who took over from Dave and Bill, they would say the HP way actually got in the way of some things. John Young used to say, be careful when you design a culture, because it may make it harder to create a change. So there are times when cultures need to change, and there were times when the HP way probably needed to change. Now, I can't tell you exactly what Meg Whitman is doing, but I think she's both creating new products and creating new organizations to deal with the product. So when she spins off products and that kind of thing, she's creating a new organizational structure. And I'm sure that she's also trying to create a culture that is simpatico with what she's doing. I'll give you an example of how cultures can be different in the same company. Go back again to Sun Microsystems. It turns out that when you have workers that are doing different jobs in the same company, sometimes it's harder to have a culture that is good for all of them. So Sun Microsystems had a culture for their engineers and their technologists. They also had janitors, they also had food service, and the culture that they had for the food service people was not the same as the culture that they had for the engineers. And it wasn't very successful. So what Scott McNealy decided to do was to, quote, spin off the food services. So what he did was he made the head of food services, instead of an underpaid employee, the owner of the company. And all the people that were providing services were now owners of a new company. And so the food service went up, the price went down, the people who were there had a different culture and they were very happy, and the engineers were just a separate culture. So you can have creative ways of having multiple cultures in the same organization. it's important for every entrepreneur to understand that designing a new venture is a journey. And the journey will vary based on the entrepreneur and the product that they're trying to develop. But in all cases, you need a vision. And vision are important. And they're important because they keep you on track. And it's not ephemeral. It's not something that people think of as, or you shouldn't think of it as something that is just extra and sort of nice to have. But it's something that's very practical, because when you start a company, you need to, from time to time, pivot one way, pivot another way. You want to get here, but you can't quite get there. And it's important for you to keep the vision even though you're pivoting. And so understand it's a journey, it's going to change, and understand that you need a vision to help you get there.